stage is set. President Trump arriving in Vietnam in just a few hours for round 2 of talks with North Korea's Kim Jong-un.
But here at home, some lawmakers are already doubting the president's negotiating skills. We're live in Hanoi.
This is not about politics. It's not about partisanship. It's about patriotism.
House Democrats vowing to derail the president's emergency declaration at our southern border.
With a vote set for today, can Democrats end the national emergency while the president is overseas? We're live in Washington.
And what happened to Truth, Justice, and the American Way? A comic book website calls out the world's most popular superhero by calling for a Superman of color.
Yeah, the crucial detail that critics, though, are forgetting on this. Fox and Friends First continues right now. Right now, but I did notice yesterday that it's definitely getting a lot brighter in the morning. And that means one thing.
What?
We're not that far away from spring and summer.
All right,
and the end
take
of this
it.
Weather, this winter weather. Anyways, don't let go.
You got away pretty unscathed.
Yeah, I never feel unscathed in the wintertime. Good morning. You're watching Fox and Friends First on this Tuesday morning. I'm Rob Schmidt.
And I'm Jillian Mealy. Thank you so much for starting your day with us. Let's get right to this Fox News alert. President Trump set to land in Hanoi in just hours after leaving D.C. Monday afternoon. The president gearing up for Summit 2.0 with Kim Jong-un starting tomorrow.
Yeah, the North Korean leader arriving to a red carpet welcome in Vietnam ahead of the denuclearization talks. Despite peace efforts, Democrats are doubtful that any real progress can be made.
He continues to have people executed, people starved and in prison. He is a vicious, murderous thug.
All right, the president is set to sign a new trade deal with Vietnamese leaders after arriving later on in the evening Hanoi time. The president and Kim Jong-un are expected to open talks with a private dinner tomorrow. So let's bring in Fox News chief national correspondent Ed Henry, who is live with us in Hanoi, Vietnam. I'm sure there's a lot of buzz in that city. Hey, Ed.
Yeah. Good to see you.
So, yeah, just tell us.
Yeah, you're absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Ed. Yeah.
No, I mean, you mentioned Kim Jong-un is already here on the ground. It's funny, it took him 2 or 3 days to get here. He took this train ride that's over a couple of thousand miles from Pyongyang here to Hanoi. As you mentioned, red carpet welcome at his hotel. The national media, the Washington Press Corps, had been there at that hotel, and they're kind of being displaced by Kim Jong-un and his delegation. Gives you an idea of what kind of a big group he has with him and the sort of the chaos that swirls around him. President Trump had 2 fueling stops, one in the UK, one in the UAE, on the way here. As you said, he'll be here in a couple hours. I think the bottom line is it's not just Democrats raising questions about all of this. You've got people in the mainstream media writing these stories, saying one story said, I believe from the Associated Press, that the nightmare scenario is the president might give away the store. This might wind up not being much of a summit. Look, the nightmare scenario in reality is a nuclear war, and that is what it appears President Trump has avoided so far. I remember a year and a half ago when you had critics saying that calling Kim Jong-un Little Rocket Man and talking about fire and fury raining down on the North Koreans from the U.S. military if they didn't cut out their nuclear testing, that was going to lead us to nuclear war. No, it didn't. Just the opposite has happened. And in fact, it was Kim Jong-un who has now stopped the nuclear testing, stopped the missiles fired over Japan and elsewhere, all because of President Trump stepping up and pushing back against him. Now there's a chance for diplomacy after Singapore, which is round 1. There's high hopes here for what might happen in Hanoi.
Hey, Ed, you know, there's been a lot of criticism of this already, even before it begins. Let's go ahead and listen to what Bob Menendez had to say, and then we'll get your reaction on the back end.
Sure.
I worry that the president wants his made-for-TV moments. I worry that he's dumbing down diplomacy at the end of the day. And I am worried that for the sake of declaring a victory, he will give too much.
Hey, Ed, what can be done, in your opinion, to make this successful to everyone?
Yeah, well, I think the Democrats are raising a fair point, at least, which is that round one in Singapore, which you mentioned, was about photo ops. It was about breaking the ice. It was about sitting down and these two countries that have had no diplomatic relations trying to forge a peace. So that's to be expected that it was largely symbolic. So the Democrats raise a fair point, at least, that here in Hanoi, there has to be substantive steps towards denuclearization. You can't just do photo ops this time. But the fact of the matter is President Trump has been driving a hard bargain in trying to get Kim Jong-un to denuclearization. And so it seems like Democrats and the media should give peace a chance, frankly, because this summit hasn't even started. They seem to be poo-pooing it.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a big mission here. I mean, there's a reason this hasn't gotten done yet. A lot of people say there's no way that Kim Jong-un is going to give up this ability and the leverage that it gives him. Ed, thank you so much for being there in Hanoi for us. We appreciate it. All right.
All right, we'll see you soon.
And Fox and Friends First will kick off special coverage of the Hanoi summit tomorrow and Thursday. We will be on the air starting at 3 a.m. Heather will be anchoring our coverage then, and Rob and I will join you at 4 a.m. Eastern time, so stay tuned for that. Today, the House will vote on a measure to block President Trump's national emergency on our southern border. The push comes as a new wave of migrants force a Texas port of entry to close.
Griff Jenkins joins us live in Washington with more on the border battle. Hey, Griff.
Good morning, guys. Yeah, Speaker Pelosi will send a strong message to the president from her Democratic-controlled House when they vote and likely pass a resolution blocking his national emergency declaration.
This is not about politics. It's not about partisanship. It's about patriotism. We would be delinquent in our duties if we did not resist, we did not fight back to overturn the president's declaration.
But her counterpart, Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, says the president is doing what's necessary to secure the border.
The president's going to get the full 200 miles that the experts said we need on these barriers to protect us, to have the border secure. And that's what the president said he would do. And he has a responsibility as a president to secure our borders.
Meanwhile, in Laredo, Texas, where the speaker visited this past weekend, CBP officials had to close a port of entry bridge due to a migrant wave attempting to cross. Now, sources in Laredo tell me they've had more than 12,000 illegal crossings this fiscal year so far. As for that resolution now, if it passes the House, which we expected, it will head next to the Senate, where some Republicans are supporting it. North Carolina Senator Thom Tillis writing this in an op-ed in the Washington Post today: as a U.S. senator, I cannot justify providing the executive with more ways to bypass Congress. As a conservative, I cannot endorse a precedent that I know will future left-wing presidents will exploit to advance radical policies that will erode economic and individual freedoms. Now, even if this resolution passes the House and the Senate, President Trump, guys, already indicating that he is fully prepared to issue his first veto. So this is going to get even more dramatic before it's over while the president's overseas.
All right, Griff, thank you very much.
All right, other news now. The man accused of murdering his brother's family and setting his own house on fire allegedly did it all for money. A grand jury indicting Paul Canero for murder, arson, and weapons charges. Prosecutors say he killed his brother's entire family and set both their New Jersey homes on fire to make it seem like the family as a whole was being targeted. Court documents show Paul was about to be cut off from the family business. He has pleaded not guilty. The funeral for a Tennessee police officer killed in a hit-and-run will be laid to rest on Friday. Nicholas Gallinger was inspecting a roadway hazard Saturday night when he was hit. The suspect, Janet Hines, turned herself in on Monday. She was arrested on 9 charges, including vehicular homicide, and given a $300,000 bond. Officer Gallinger graduated from the police academy last month. He is survived by 2 children.
Billionaire businessman Robert Kraft is officially charged with soliciting sex. The New England Patriots owner facing up to a year in jail for paying prostitutes in Jupiter, Florida. Prosecutors claim to have video evidence of Kraft in the act on the same day his team played a playoff game in Kansas City last month. He is accused in a months-long investigation that resulted in dozens of arrests. Kraft denies engaging in any illegal activity. President Trump blasting the left for blocking an anti-abortion bill. He tweeted, quote, Senate Democrats just voted against legislation to prevent the killing of newborn infant children. The Democrat position on abortion is now so extreme that they don't mind executing babies after birth. This will be remembered as one of the most shocking votes in the history of Congress. If there is one thing we should all agree on, it's protecting the lives of innocent babies. The bill would have penalized doctors who harm babies that survive an abortion. Meanwhile, Washington State's Attorney General says he will sue the president over a new policy barring taxpayer-funded clinics from making abortion referrals.
All right, 10 minutes after the hour. What do we have to lose? Well, a lot more than North Korea, according to our next guest. Former intelligence officer Don Bramer outlines the steps that the president needs to take in Hanoi to make progress.
And many HGTV fans already consider them royalty, but now Chip and Joanna Gaines might really be. We'll explain. Don't go anywhere.
And I think we can have a very good summit. I think we'll have a very tremendous summit. We want denuclearization. We're going to have a signing summit, which is even better. So hopefully we can get that completed, but we're getting very, very close.
All right, President set to arrive in Vietnam here in just a few hours and remains confident that Kim Jong-un will agree to denuclearize.
So what does the president need to do to make sure that happens? Here now to weigh in is former intelligence officer Don Bramer. Thank you for being here this morning.
Hey, good morning.
We were just talking in the commercial break. You don't think this is necessarily going to be a, one document signed type of summit that needs to happen. So what do you think is going to happen? How is this going to play out? How can it be successful?
Well, Jillian, good morning. So I think this is going to be a step of a managed process. This cannot happen overnight. And a matter of fact, during President Reagan and Gorbachev, that took nearly a decade. So why we expect this to happen in 12 months, I have no idea where that came from. What I see is that there will be a series of steps. Kim Jong will do this, and then the United States will counter with this. It may be lessening of sanctions. It could be a number of different things, but step by step, we will get to the denuclearization. It's just going to take some time and patience.
After the first summit, I mean, the president touts that there haven't been any, nuclear testing, missile testing, things like that. But we also haven't seen any indication that this man and this country want to denuclearize. They're not taking any steps toward doing that. So I think a lot of the skepticism about whether or not this is worth it is warranted. What do you think?
Well, skepticism is always going to be part of that. But the thing about it is, you're right, in 18 months we haven't seen any testing. What we do see is even from the commanders on the ground in South Korea, they've already noted that tensions are lower. There's a lot less going on there. So it's going to be a process, and it's always worth it. Is war worth it? No. So let's keep moving forward as long as we're having a dialogue. And we're doing something that hasn't been done in the last 3 administrations. Let's look at this.
But aren't the Vietnamese, or the North Koreans, I should say, aren't they able to continue building their arsenal during all of this time? I mean, they talk about how Kim Jong-un loves to stretch this out as long as he can because he's still working towards getting his weapons.
Well, it's just, we haven't reached that first step. Yeah. And as long as he keeps talking and there's a dialogue, of course they're going to continue to build. They're not testing, though, right now. They're not going to lower their guard just yet. You can't ask a country to completely stop defending itself when they have so many reasons to not trust the world right now. They've been the victim for so long that they have to lower their own guard before they'll decide to play ball.
Some of the criticism from the last summit was that President Trump was just a little bit too friendly on the appearance side of it with Kim Jong-un. Look, we don't know what happens behind closed doors. What do you want to see from him? How do you want his tone to be?
I think the tone this time is this has to be more than a photo op. There has to be something that comes out of this meeting and this summit that's tangible. It could be, we're working towards ending the Korean War. It could be we're announcing the steps towards this new denuclearization. It just has to be a process, and he has to come forward that he's not just walking away. They took the picture, and we had a good time.
Right.
Yeah. You make a good point. I mean, when you go back, and I do want to bring up a poll, guys, if we can, that illustrates this, and actually was surprising to see that the number of people that think that the U.S. should take some kind of military action to stop this program if it comes to that. Look at that percentage of 49. I mean, this really indicates to me how bad this issue was under President Obama, how close this got. Everything has cooled down, like you said. That's great progress.
Anything that means we're not firing missiles, not firing bombs, is progress in my book.
And when it comes to North Korea, nobody expects change, significant change overnight.
No, it took us more than 65 years to get to this point. Let's not expect it to happen one day.
Okay.
Sir, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Jillian.
It is 18 minutes after the hour. Do as I say, not as I do. Bernie Sanders says climate change is a global threat. So why was he jet-setting across the country while campaigning for Hillary in 2016?
People sounding off on social media about those private flights. Carly is here to talk about that coming up.
Good Tuesday morning. Welcome back. Climate change fanatic and 2020 candidate Bernie Sanders is slammed by former Hillary Clinton staffers for his use of private jets during the 2016 election.
Carly Shimkus with Fox News Headlines 24/7, Sirius XM 115 is here with the story, and the hypocrisy is thick on this one.
You
Carly.
better believe it, Rob. Good morning, guys. So Bernie Sanders is facing mounting questions over a recent Politico piece. In it, a former Clinton staffer claims Bernie Sanders used a private jet to make campaign appearances for Clinton during the 2016 presidential election. Now, this would, of course, fly in the face of Sanders' calls to combat climate change. A Sanders spokesperson now telling Politico that it would have been impossible for him to make all the campaign appearances that Clinton required, flying commercials, saying that's why chartered flights were used to make sure Senator Sanders could get to as many locations as quickly as possible in the effort to help the Democratic ticket defeat Donald Trump. But that's not all, guys. Sanders reportedly continued to fly private, spending a total of $342,000 on private airfare between 2017 and 2018. So social media now sounding off. Chip on Facebook says socialist leadership always travels first class. An Instagram user says we finally found big carbon foot. And another person on Instagram chiming in saying this is how socialism works. The elite get the absolute best and the rest are equally beneath them. So will Senator Sanders fly commercial or private during the 2020 campaign? His spokesperson says he will fly commercial as much as possible.
Okay.
Yeah,
Some of us don't know what it's like to fly first class or private jet.
That's right.
A lot of us.
Being one of them.
It's more about the hypocrisy of being a socialist and being living that billionaire lifestyle. All right, let's talk about JetBlue. What on earth were they thinking with this?
Yeah, that's the big question today. So JetBlue is apologizing after honoring a former Black Panther member, Assata Shakur, as part of their Black History Month display at JFK Airport. Assata Shakur has been on the FBI's most wanted list since murdering a police officer and then escaping from prison in 1979. JetBlue now apologizing in a statement saying, our crew members came together to celebrate Black History Month. When we learned of concerns regarding one individual, we immediately removed the poster. We apologize for any offense the poster may have caused. Offense was caused indeed. One person on Instagram saying, notice that JetBlue apologized but did not repudiate. And another social media user chiming in saying, so what are we to believe? Sloppy vetting by JetBlue, or didn't like the heat that comes with honoring a fugitive cop killer? So huge mistake by JetBlue.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. All right.
Carly.
Carly, thanks.
Appreciate it, guys.
So our own Sean Hannity now going viral after he was forced to hit the streets of Vietnam on two wheels.
He jumped on a scooter in Hanoi to bypass traffic and get to his show on time last night. Check it out.
The only way to travel. This is it, right here. Otherwise, we wouldn't make the show tonight.
Okay, well, he did make it just before airtime, thanks to his fantastic driver. It doesn't even look like that's really helping much, though.
Yeah, you're not moving
everywhere
in that town unless you got two wheels, it looks like. One of our producers on the ground sharing this video showing just how chaotic traffic is in downtown Hanoi. I mean, yeah, the scooter's the way. Scooter or walk, yeah.
It is 25 minutes after the hour. A reporter covering Venezuela just became the story. What Jorge Ramos is now saying about being detained by disputed President Nicolas Maduro.
and guarantee health care to all people as a right.
We must stand up against those who pollute our land, our water, and our air.
All right, so the 2020 Democrats are all in on some fiercely progressive policies, but there haven't been a lot of details when it comes to foreign policy. So what are their positions as the current president works to make some strides overseas? We debate that straight ahead. Hey, welcome back. Look at our top headlines this morning in a Fox News alert. President Trump set to land in Hanoi, Vietnam in just a few hours for a second summit with Kim Jong-un. The North Korean leader arriving to a red carpet welcome in Vietnam overnight. The two world leaders are expected to open denuclearization talks with a private dinner tomorrow.
A live look at Capitol Hill, where today House Democrats will vote on a measure to block the president's national emergency on our border. Democrats call the declaration unconstitutional. The House is expected to pass a resolution and send it off to the Senate.
And Michael Cohen will testify before the Senate Intel Committee. President Trump's former attorney expected to be grilled on several topics in a hearing that could last more than 10 hours today. A public hearing in front of the House Oversight Committee is scheduled for tomorrow. According to the Wall Street Journal, he is expected to testify that President Trump engaged in criminal conduct while in office.
Univision journalist and American citizen Jorge Ramos is speaking out after being detained in Venezuela by disputed President Nicolas Maduro.
This as Vice President Mike Pence meets with the opposition leader in hopes of bringing change to the socialist country. Todd Pyra joins us live with a very alarming story. Hey, Todd.
Yeah, that's right, guys. Good morning to both of you. The frightening experience happening as Ramos asked Maduro questions about the humanitarian crisis, lack of democracy, and torture of political prisoners, apparently all coming to a head when Ramos showed Maduro a video he didn't like. In it, children are seen picking through garbage on the street. Maduro ordering the seizure of the video and the Univision crew's equipment, including TVs and phones, and detaining 6 journalists, including Ramos, for about 2 hours before they were released.
And he thinks that he can censor international press the same way he censors people in Venezuela, but he cannot do that. We won't be silent. This is an abuse.
Meantime, the U.S. and other nations demanding Maduro step down, recognizing opposition leader Juan Guaido as Venezuela's rightful leader. Vice President Mike Pence meeting with Guaido in Colombia, promising stronger sanctions against Maduro government officials and committing more than $50 million in support. The VP also urging a coalition of Latin American nations and Canada to freeze the assets of Venezuela's state-owned oil company in response to violent clashes, saying military action is a possibility.
We hope for a peaceful transition. We hope that diplomatic and economic pressure and the voice of nations around the world will result in a peaceful transition. All options are on the table.
Maduro accusing the U.S. of trying to fabricate a crisis to start a war in South America. Over to you.
His behavior trying to hold on to power has just been pitiful.
Yeah.
Todd, thank you so much. Okay. All right, Russian state TV revealing the Kremlin's nuclear hit list in a potential missile attack on the United States. The American targets reportedly include the Pentagon and Camp David. The Kremlin apparently developing a hypersonic missile that could hit those marks in just 5 minutes. Vladimir Putin recently threatening an attack if the U.S. moves nuclear weapons into Europe. Tensions increasing amid the U.S. pulling out of that nuclear treaty over alleged Russian violations over the years. The Alabama woman who left the United States to become an ISIS bride should face justice in the United States. That is according to Alabama Senator Doug Jones, who says it would, quote, send a powerful message that any American who lends support to a terrorist organization will be pursued to the fullest extent of the law. Hoda Muthana's father is suing the Trump administration for blocking her return to the U.S. There is confusion over whether she is a citizen since her father is a former diplomat.
How about this? An ice tsunami spurs evacuations along Lake Erie. Check it out. You can see massive ice chunks pushing against the Niagara River Parkway in Canada, forcing parts of the road to close. On the New York side, ice mounts up to 30 feet high, coming right up to people's homes. Hurricane-force winds reported across New York, leaving hundreds of thousands without power.
Yeah, boy, look at that. That's crazy. Janice Dean is here with what we can expect today. It seems less windy here in New York anyway.
Less windy, but colder, right?
Yeah.
So it's 26 here in New York, but with the wind chill, it feels even cooler than that. You can see where we've got that cold air push across the northern plains and parts of the Midwest where it's 1 in Minneapolis. And with the wind chill, it's below 0. Past 24 hours, so that storm system has exited the Northeast. It's a lot less windier. We're still seeing that lake effect snow. Some showers along the Gulf Coast. And then this is going to be the big story across the West Coast. The Bay Area getting socked with more heavy rain and mountain snow. We could see upwards of 4 feet in the Sierra Nevada mountains with this next moisture plume that comes in off the Pacific. So that is going to be a big concern, especially across central and northern California, up towards the Northwest and in towards the northern Rockies with quite a bit of snow. There is your forecast today. Again, the West Coast getting more rain and snow. That system exits the Northeast, so less windy conditions. We'll have partly sunny skies in New York, and then we'll see a little bit of snow across the upper Midwest. I believe spring is 3.5 weeks away.
I can taste it. I know it's coming. It just seems brighter outside all day long.
Absolutely. So the sun is out earlier and
higher in the sky.
It will come.
Yeah.
Yes.
Janice, thank you so much.
Thank you.
HGTV's fixer-upper stars can now call themselves royalty. Well, kind of anyway. Chip and Joanna Gaines purchasing this historic property in Waco, Texas, known as the Cottonland Castle. Built in 1890, the stone structure was listed at $425,000. It has 3 bedrooms and 2.5 bathrooms. The couple plans to restore it. Beautiful.
That is cool. Yeah.
All right. It is 35 minutes after the hour. 2020 Democrats all in on their progressive policies.
If you are a minimum wage worker, you cannot afford market rate for a 1-bedroom apartment.
We must stand up against those who pollute our land.
But what about foreign policy? What are their positions as President Trump works to make strides overseas? That debate is coming your way next.
And one comic book website slamming Superman for a lack of diversity. But the man of Steel himself, one of them anyway, Dean Cain, says not so fast. The crucial detail that he says critics are forgetting. All right, while the president is making some progress overseas, voters have heard very little on foreign policy positions from the numerous 2020 Democratic hopefuls. Instead, many are staying more domestic and pushing very progressive policies.
We have got to fight to do exactly what every other country does and guarantee health care to all people as a right.
If you are a minimum wage worker, working full-time, you cannot afford market rate for a 1-bedroom apartment.
We must stand up against those who pollute our land, our water, and our air.
So as you heard there, hyper-focused on domestic issues. When can we expect, though, some foreign policy proposals from progressives or some more serious proposals? Here to debate, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State under President Obama, Joel Rubin, and from the Trump Campaign Advisory Board, Madison Gesiotto. Thank you guys for coming on this morning. We appreciate it. Joel, I'm going to start with you. Yeah, thank you. There's been no real standard. I mean, there's a lot going on in the world right now. It's a very complicated foreign situation that we have in this country, and you're not hearing a lot of details. What do you think?
Well, Rob, there's a lot going on clearly with North Korea even today and Venezuela. And Democrats are in a divisive moment right now. We have progressive base voters who really are focused on domestic issues, and yet the president's putting out a vision of America's role in the world that is very antithetical to the traditional democratic positions of promoting democracy and human rights and American security that's rooted in realism. So the candidates are kind of caught in between these positions and are really not engaging hard on foreign policy, which I believe could put them at a disadvantage in the general election, but could also be a distinguishing quality in these primaries.
Yeah. Madison, you look domestically, we're pretty healthy in this country right now. We've got everybody working and we've got a strong economy. Most of our big threats are coming from overseas, and the Democratic Party, at least the candidates, are not in unison at this point. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, when we look internationally, we're seeing major issues when it comes to North Korea, Venezuela, China, and of course in the Middle East. And we see very few Democratic candidates talking about this. I browsed their websites. Many of them don't have any issues on there. Of course, out of the 12 that I looked at this morning, only 4 had foreign policy on there. And the only big name candidate who had anything about foreign policy on their website was Elizabeth Warren. It was the very last issue that she had listed. And part of it was just about opposing President Trump and resisting President Trump. And so it's very frustrating, I think, for many voters that I've talked to that are Democrats that want to know where these candidates stand on the foreign policy issues. And I think one of the things that may set a candidate apart is someone who's strong in talking about foreign policy. Of course, as you know, that's Joe Biden right now. And so I think it could be interesting if he comes in and is really, really focused on that in this race. I think he could ultimately take the nomination compared to people like, you know, Kamala Harris and Cory Booker, who are all talking about the same things, Medicare for all, and these expensive, radical, liberal, far-left policies.
Well, yeah, at this point, I think Biden does have the lead in the early polling, and then it's Bernie Sanders after that. Joel, most of the more left Democrats want less foreign intervention, and they want to spend that money here at home. Does that resonate with most Democratic voters?
It really does. The Democratic base is going to decide who wins this nomination, and the Democratic base, again, is focused on domestic politics. If one can make a cogent argument about reducing defense spending and increasing expenditures here at home, that's going to hold a lot of sway with Democratic base voters. But still, the vision of America's role in the world and having one that promotes diplomacy abroad and that really ensures that our allies are with us, that's something that's going to permeate across Democrats. But the difference is going to be between the details and how much will be anti-Trump versus pro-diplomacy. We'll see that split right now on North Korea in particular.
Yeah, Madison, you've got Green New Deal, you've got guaranteed jobs for everybody, guaranteed college that's free. I saw an editorial cartoon yesterday that was actually pretty funny and pretty telling. It showed all the candidates for president pushing a donkey, the Democrat donkey, to the left until they all fall over the edge of a cliff. Are they going to lose the moderates that helped them win in 2018? Are they going to lose them in 2020 talking this way?
Yeah, I think they will. And I mean, when you look at even some of the Democrats that are farther left than the traditional moderates, and you're talking to them about these ideas, yeah, it all sounds great in theory, but when you break down the policies to them, they don't actually agree with them. They don't support these policies. Medicare for all polling, a great example of this. You're looking at over 70% of people say, yes, Medicare for all sounds great. But when you start getting into the nitty gritty of the polling, when you tell them, oh, this would eliminate private health insurance, this all drops down into the 20%. So this is very, very different than this broad support for these far-left policies that they like for people to believe. And, of course, very similar when we look at the Green New Deal.
Okay. All right. Guys, very interesting. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
It's about 15 minutes until the top of the hour. Comedian Jon Stewart standing with America's heroes, pushing Congress to restock the 9/11 Victims Compensation Fund. Our next guest is a 9/11 first responder who is now in D.C., making the case to lawmakers, why he says this is critical.
But first, let's check in with Pete Hegseth, see what's coming up on Fox and Friends. Hey, Pete.
Morning, guys. Hey, Rob, you were just talking about the Green New Deal. According to a new study, it's going to cost you $93 trillion. That's $650,000 for you, Rob. Write the check, care of me, will you?
He'll take care of it for you.
Yeah, I'll make sure it's taken care of very nicely. All right, guys? We also find out that Bernie Sanders, when he was running for president, the guy who's all about climate change reform, $300,000 worth of private flights to get Hillary Clinton not elected. We'll bring that to you, and many other things, including AOC. She's got an acronym she does not deserve. She says that you shouldn't have kids because the world's going to end in 10 years. We got a lot of folks who are going to come on our program on Fox and Friends today and share insights on those. Mike Huckabee, Representative Steve Scalise, Morgan Ortagus, and Governor Greg Abbott will be here on Fox and Friends. Don't miss it in about 14 minutes, but stay with the first, folks.